3 days after Tom's funeral, I found out he had a daughter, and she wasn't mine. The drawer didn't creak. The hinges had been oiled, of course they had. He hated sounds that lingered after their purpose was done. There was a folder of warranty slips, a box of ink cartridges for a printer we no longer owned, and tucked behind it, all a phone I had never seen before. Not his usual one, not the phone that sat idle on the nightstand for months before his heart gave out near the Piggly Wiggly parking lot. It was chipped along the corner, a fine diagonal crack across the glass. The kind of break you get when something falls but doesn't die. Still functional. Like him, I suppose. There was a voicemail icon glowing red. One unheard message. No other apps, no photos, no contacts with names, just numbers. I pressed play, not out of curiosity, more like habit. My hand knew what to do before I did. Mr. Tom, Mama's not breathing right again. She says not to call nobody but you. Jude won't stop crying. Please come. Please. We don't know what to do. A child's voice. Not more than 8. Girl, I thought. Breathless, whispering like someone in a house where adults sleep too much and eat too little. The call was time-stamped 2 days before the collapse. She called him Mr. Tom. That was what the neighbors' grandkids used to call him when they played near the fence. But none of them lived here anymore. None of them would have called him like that. Tom used to say he didn't like children. Said they were loud. That they made sticky things stickier. When I asked him why we never looked into adoption, he said, "We're enough, that's rare. People should appreciate rare." I placed the phone on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it might ring again. It didn't. I leaned on the edge of the counter, my hand brushing against a coffee stain that never came out. He'd spilled it the morning we forgot our anniversary, both of us pretending it was just another Thursday. That ring of brown had become part of the house, like his chair, like the dent in the hallway wall from when he moved the dresser alone. The knock came sharp and brief. 3, then silence. She was tall, lean hair pulled so tight it seemed to lift her cheekbones. Clipboard, badge, shoes with no sound. Her name tag read Janice McMillan. She didn't ask if it was a good time. We're following up on a record associated with Mr. Thomas Whitaker. We need to verify whether you're in a position to assume temporary care of the minors he was supporting. Minors. She nodded once. 3 children currently without legal guardianship. He's listed in our internal notes as their primary point of contact. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. She handed me a packet. I didn't read it. I watched her eyes instead. Professional. Not unkind. The kind of face that's seen too many overgrown closets and unopened fridges to be surprised anymore. I wasn't aware of any children, I said. Eventually. She didn't look surprised. Of course, she murmured. That's often the case. There was nothing else. She left the papers. Said she'd give me space. Said someone from placement services would be in touch if no response was filed by Friday. I didn't remember closing the door behind her. I took the envelope, left it unopened, and sat back down with the phone. I scrolled through the call log. One number had been dialed over and over. It ended in 7812. I didn't recognize it. He hadn't called me from that phone. Never once. In our bedroom, the closet still smelled faintly of his shaving cream. There was a drawer where he kept cufflinks no one asked him to wear. His wedding band rested in the ceramic dish beside the bed. I hadn't moved it. The band was still warm when they handed it to me at the hospital. That's what I remembered most. Not his face, not the way his hand looked against the white sheet. Just the warmth of metal outlasting the man. That night, I opened the bank app. I'd avoided it for days. The bills were automated. I'd paid for the funeral in cash. There were $45,000 missing from our joint savings. pulled over the last 2 years in quiet, rounded amounts. Each withdrawal labeled the same ATM, off-site. I traced them backward, one every 2 weeks, sometimes more. He was always careful with money, always told me to keep a cushion, said retirement would stretch longer than we thought. I used to call it hoarding. He called it protecting. The next morning, I dialed the 78112 number, once. It rang, then went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I walked through the house, slowly checking light switches, adjusting pillows. It didn't need to be tidy, but I needed something to arrange, something to set right, even if it had never been wrong in the first place. Later that afternoon, I pulled a pie dish from the top shelf. There was a paper tucked inside, folded into thirds. A list in Tom's handwriting. Groceries for R. Don't forget children's vitamins. Bus fare X3. Sunday read to them. Bring frog and toad. Call Donna if things get worse. I refolded it and put it back exactly where I found it. I didn't cook that night. I made toast, half burnt. Buttered it too cold so it tore the bread. Outside, the street lamp flickered. I remembered him once saying the bulb was old, it'd go out eventually. Some things don't need replacing, he said, until they leave you in the dark. No one from the family had called. No one asked where I'd been sitting during the funeral. They let me stand in the back. I never realized how loud a kitchen could be until I stopped waiting for footsteps behind me. The kettle sang low, a muted sort of whistle, like it knew not to disturb anyone. I watched the steam curl from its spout while my hands held still on the counter, palms open. I'd set out one teacup white porcelain hairline crack down the handle, the last thing I took from the old house. Lily's socks were still tucked under the leg of the fold-out chair. Levi's drawing, just a few spirals, and a name misspelled, had been pinned to the door of the mini-fridge with a green butterfly magnet. Owen's school paper was folded and used as a coaster for my tea. Nothing in this space was new. Nothing was bought to impress. But nothing was borrowed either. I lifted the lid of the kettle. The water trembled like it wanted to speak, but hadn't been asked. No one had spoken to me that morning. No good morning, no questions. And yet the silence felt less like absence and more like a room exhaling. I poured into the cup. It wasn't much, not hot enough to burn, but warm enough to wrap 2 hands around. The paperwork sat where I'd left it. One yellow folder, one plain envelope, one small note folded in thirds. I didn't touch them yet. I reached instead for a slice of toast already cooled and broke it into quarters. No butter, no plate. Behind me, someone shifted. A quiet inhale, then the sound of a small elbow hitting fabric. I didn't turn. I knew it was Lily. The girl breathed like she was always trying to hear herself over something. She didn't speak. She sat. She reached for the cup I'd just poured, lifted it in both hands like I had. No thank you. No glance. I dreamed I forgot where we lived, she said. Then I woke up and it was still here. She took a sip, made a face. You forgot the honey again. I let the corner of my mouth shift, but only briefly. I think that means it's not a dream, I said. She leaned her cheek against the table. The angle of her body reminded me of the last time I'd seen Rachel sitting like that, exhausted and too proud to say so. I didn't mention it. The floor creaked above. Levi. His feet never landed lightly. Owen tended to wait longer, like he was measuring whether the morning had earned his attention. I pushed the toast toward her. She didn't touch it. He hid the money for us, Lily said. Not them. My fingers curled around the handle of the drawer. That's not why we're here, I said. I know. She reached for the toast after all, but it helps. I opened the drawer. Not for utensils, but for the photograph. The only one I'd printed. My mother's arms circled around a toddler version of me, both of us sun-flushed and caught mid-laughter. She'd been wearing that mustard cardigan with the patched sleeves. I hadn't remembered the color until the photo arrived. I kept it in the drawer face down. I folded the legal name change certificate in half and placed it behind the picture. The ink had dried 2 days ago. I hadn't told anyone what I'd done. I didn't expect anyone to notice. Levi appeared in the hallway, his blanket still over one shoulder, dragging a corner on the floor. He looked at the table, then me. "You kept it," he said. "The book." He meant Charlotte's Web. It lay where I'd last seen it open to the blank page Lily had written over. I nodded. "I read it last night," he said, "but I didn't finish." "You were sleeping. You can finish it today." His eyes narrowed. "But it's already done." "Not quite," I said. "Some endings don't end." He climbed onto the bench beside his sister and stared at her tea. She handed it to him without speaking. He drank from the spot she had. Owen didn't come out right away. That wasn't new. I took the final document, the guardianship order, and held it flat against the table with the palm of my hand. The embossed seal left a dent in the wood underneath. There'd been no ceremony, just a woman at the agency with a clipboard and an apologetic shrug. "Technically you qualify," she'd said, barely. "But it's better than foster care." She hadn't asked why I bothered. She'd only asked if I had room. I had more than room. I had silence. I had a kitchen with no one correcting my movements. I had 3 sets of mismatched mugs and enough chairs to not sit alone. "You forgot to sign the note," Lily said. I looked at her. On the fridge. I walked to it. The page was still pinned where I left it. "Family is where you don't have to prove why you're allowed to stay." Below it, I added my name. Not Whitaker, not Mays. Just Green. Owen emerged yawning, carrying a single sneaker. He didn't ask for breakfast. He just looked at the cup in front of Lily, then reached up to the cabinet and pulled another down. "You made tea," he said. "Just 1 cup," he nodded. "I can heat water. You'll need to refill the kettle." He paused, then turned the sink on low. "I know how." I stepped away from the fridge and sat down. My chair wobbled slightly on one uneven leg. I didn't fix it. The window fogged as the sun pushed through. It lit the green magnet first, then the paper. Then nothing else. I closed my eyes and thought of the tree outside the bare one with roots older than any of us. No one had trimmed it. No one had told it where to grow, and still it held. I didn't reach for the toast. I didn't refill the kettle. I didn't ask the children to speak or stay. They already had. I no longer needed to be named to exist. In this house, no one waited to be chosen. We were already here. They'd always assumed we were fine. At midnight, I placed the unknown phone inside a drawer lined with tea towels. I didn't wrap it. I didn't turn it off. Just closed the drawer and left the room. I didn't cry. I checked the windows. And in the quiet that followed, I decided not to tell anyone what I'd heard on that voicemail. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some truths make less noise when kept in a drawer. I used to think being chosen meant being safe. Tom didn't like to plan vacations. He said the weather changed too much, that crowds made him tired, that we could see the Grand Canyon any time. I kept the brochure in the kitchen drawer for years underneath the aluminum foil and old coupons. He once used it to steady a chair leg. Sundays were his quiet days. He left early with a thermos and came home with paint on his hands or dust on his collar. Job sites, he'd call them. I stopped asking which one. After a while, it all blurred: hardware stores, roadside motels, gas receipts, folded too precisely for chance. When his sister Nadine visited, she used to whisper just loud enough, "He's lucky you're so low maintenance." Most women would have taken that passport out of the drawer by now. And then, "You know, Donna, if a man's always out fixing things somewhere else, it usually means something's broken at home." I laughed once. That was the last time. He wore the same blue flannel jacket every winter, even when it frayed at the cuffs. I stitched it once along the inner seam. 2 weeks later, he replaced it with a newer version identical, except for the absence of my repair. I never asked where the old one went, but the needle stayed in my sewing tin, threaded with the same dull blue, still looped unfinished. On Christmas Eve, 5 years ago, I found a receipt in his coat pocket. Children's shoes. Size 4, pink with tiny reflective hearts. He said they were for the daughter of a subcontractor. Her name's April, he said. He's a good guy. She's shy, won't let go of him even on sight. That year my gift was a spatula with a walnut handle. Tom figured you'd want something useful. At a family dinner, his cousin Marion toasted to the real backbone of the Whitaker family, Nadine, and her perfect little household. I was sitting right there. Tom didn't flinch, just raised his glass and passed the carrots. He always kept his tax files in the bottom drawer, neatly labeled. I never touched them. But once I slipped a letter in between handwritten, folded small no envelope. I had written it at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I wrote that I missed him, that I felt like a guest in my own life, that he hadn't said my name aloud in 2 weeks. 6 months after his death, when I was looking for an old warranty, I found the letter. Still folded. Still there. He'd labeled it Miss, in his handwriting. The M was pressed harder than the rest, like the pen hesitated before following through. I think that was when I started disappearing. There were phone calls from women I didn't know. Names that sounded like realtors or HR managers. They always said the same thing. Sorry to call so late. Is Tom available? After the third one, I asked why he gave out the home number. He said cell reception's awful near the job sites. You know that. At the last 4th of July cookout, I offered to bring dessert. Nadine told me not to bother. We've got it covered, she said. Tom looked over and added, besides, no one beats Nadine's lemon squares. I made a peach cobbler anyway. I brought it in a white ceramic dish, the one with the chipped edge from my mother's kitchen. No one touched it. When I brought it home, only my serving had been removed. One clean corner scooped out like it had never belonged there to begin with. The next morning, Tom washed the dish, dried it, and placed it back in the cupboard. Not a word. Just left the lemon squares in the fridge, covered in foil. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself people would kill for a man who came home every night, who paid the bills, who never raised his voice. You don't need all that attention, my sister once told me. You've got stability. That's more than most. I nodded. I told her she was right, but I started forgetting things, appointments, groceries, whole conversations. I'd walk into a room and forget why I was there. I left a burner on one night until the smoke alarm screamed through the walls. Tom didn't yell. He opened a window and muttered, "Next time, just order in." I began sleeping with the bedroom door slightly ajar. He liked it closed. Said light from the hallway gave him headaches. I said it helped me breathe. He started bringing home less and less. Fewer shirts, fewer stories. He'd sit at the table and read the newspaper even on days it hadn't arrived. Just unfolded it like it was there, traced the creases, folded it again. Sometimes I'd speak, and he wouldn't look up. And when he did, it was like he expected someone else to be there. Like my voice didn't match the room anymore. Once after his mother's memorial, Nadine pulled me aside in the kitchen. She was drying silverware. Donna, she said, some women have presence. You just have consistency. I didn't answer. I wiped the counter twice, even though it was clean. That night, Tom kissed my forehead before bed. He didn't say goodnight. He didn't ask if I was okay. He hadn't done that in years. But he kissed my forehead the way someone closes a book they've already finished. Now I open the spice cabinet and stare at the tin of ground cloves. He hated cloves. I kept buying them. I didn't know why. Maybe I thought if something small stayed stubborn, it meant I hadn't gone completely. I used to think being quiet was a strength, that if I was agreeable enough, steady enough, he'd see me again. That maybe one day he'd reach for a coat pocket and find a note or a receipt or a forgotten piece of me and remember that I was still here. But coats get replaced. And so do people. I don't know if I faded or if I folded. Maybe both. But I stopped asking to be remembered when I realized how long I'd been easy to forget. I was the one who brought the green beans with slivered almonds, but it was Nadine they thanked for the centerpiece. At the 60-year Whittaker anniversary, I carried 3 trays from the car, reheated the ham, sliced the bread without asking whose job it was, and ironed the table runner no one noticed. When they called for a group photo, someone said, "Let's keep it tight so everyone fits," and I found myself just outside the edge of the frame. A niece patted my arm on the way back to the buffet. "You'll be in the next one." I nodded, holding the serving spoon like it might snap. Later that evening, Tom sat on the porch with his brother and laughed so loud it startled the dog. I stayed in the kitchen, rinsing glasses that weren't mine, stacking plates I hadn't eaten off. I kept thinking of how Marion had toasted to all the women who made this family work, listing each one by name, Nadine, Ruth, even Greg's new girlfriend, who'd only been around 3 months. She ended with, and of course Tom's lovely wife, her smile already moving on. That Christmas, the family photo card came in glossy red. The back listed every child, every couple, even the dog. Under Tom's name it read, "And his lovely wife." No name, no title, just a placeholder. When I pointed it out, Tom said, "You know they meant you." I flipped the card over and read it again. It was hard to feel real when even the ink forgot who you were. The following spring, I received a letter from the Women's Civic League. They were giving me a small award, community involvement, 20 years of quiet work, that sort of thing. I left the envelope on the counter so he'd see it. He moved it to the side, placed his keys on top. The night of the ceremony, I wore a navy blouse I'd saved since our anniversary in Savannah. Tom had a contractor meeting. I drove alone, sat in the 3rd row by myself. When my name was read, it caught in the microphone, mispronounced just slightly, like a hiccup. I smiled anyway. I clapped for the others. I drove home with the plaque seat-belted in the passenger seat. When I placed it on the mantel, Tom glanced up from the paper. "That's nice," he said. "Not too shiny." He posted pictures on Facebook the next weekend from Nadine's bakery opening. Balloons, ribbon cutting, strawberry tarts. He captioned it, "Family is the best foundation." The frame on our hallway table held our wedding photo. My dress was off-white. His tie was crooked. I looked too young for the weight I was carrying. I opened our album that night, flipped through the pages slowly. Somewhere around the 3rd spread, I stopped at a photo of Tom holding a baby. Not ours, of course, but someone's niece or goddaughter. I could never remember who. The way he looked at her was tender, almost cautious, like he was holding something alive for the first time. It was the same expression in the picture Nadine had hanging in her living room, a newer one. Different child, still not ours. This girl had soft brown curls and a slight overbite clinging to his shoulder like she belonged there. Her name was printed in glitter vinyl at the bottom of the frame, Lily Mays, Summer Picnic. I saw it while setting down a tray of deviled eggs. No one explained why the photo hung so prominently. No one seemed to think I needed the context. I didn't ask. I never did. On Tom's last birthday before the hospital, I made a lemon loaf from scratch. I grated the zest by hand. He took one bite and said, "You didn't get the glaze right." Then he left for his brother's house, said they were grilling steaks. I watched his taillights disappear and threw the rest of the loaf into the trash without wrapping it. I once tried to keep a journal. Nothing elaborate, just small things, fragments. I wrote down how many times he touched me in a week, how often he said my name. The entries became numbers, then dashes, then blank spaces. I stopped after a month. The notebook is still in my nightstand, wedged behind a flashlight that barely works. During a family brunch at the lake, Marion pulled me aside near the screen door. "I always wondered why you never had children," she said. Then some women just don't carry that softness, you know. She smiled like she was sharing a secret. I folded the napkins tighter and carried the silverware out to the deck. I wonder how many people like me exist. Women who live inside stories they didn't write but were assigned to edit. I wonder how many casseroles have been baked by hands no one remembered to thank. They always remembered the cornbread I made, though. Nadine once told me, "You should bottle that. It's the only reason people keep inviting you." She laughed when she said it. I didn't. There's a wooden spoon in my drawer burned slightly on the edge. It's from the first Thanksgiving Tom and I hosted. I used it every year. Last week I held it over the trash can for a full minute. Then I placed it back gently, like a museum artifact. No one remembers the spoon, but I do. I didn't need them to praise me. I only needed them to notice. They never did. Tom's death didn't end our marriage. It confirmed what I hadn't dared to admit. I wasn't his partner. I was the quiet space he stored things in and never looked for again. I didn't bring my purse into the office. Just my coat folded over my arm and the keyring I still hadn't removed from the hook by the front door. Ray Delaney wore the same pale tie he had at the memorial. He smiled too quickly and gestured to a seat without looking up from the papers. The leather chair creaked as I sat the sound small but precise. He pushed a folder toward me, a paperclip holding down the corners. I noticed his wedding band polished smooth, resting against the edge as he turned the last page. "Your husband Thomas left a revision. This version was notarized 3 months before his passing. Do you recall any conversations about that time I stared at the notary seal? Gold foil, still crisp. There was nothing he mentioned. Right." He adjusted his cuff. "The revision covers several assets. The house your joint account ending in 7721 and his shares in Whitaker Construction, all designated to a Rachel Mays for the benefit of her dependents." I blinked slowly, like my hearing would correct itself if I gave it time. His pen tapped the corner of the form. "The property deed was transferred in advance. It's been legally her name since April." I ran my thumb along the coat seam. I had hemmed it myself last fall when Tom said it looked too long for someone not as tall as I used to be. So I'm living in a house that isn't mine. In legal terms, yes. However, you may file for limited residency provided the new deed holder agrees. There was no apology in his tone. Only steps. Only procedures. Did he mention why I heard myself ask? Ray hesitated for the first time. There's a note in his own handwriting. "So her kids will always have a roof." He slid it across the desk. The ink looked freshly blue. His signature was neat, precisely the same as on our wedding license, which I had tucked inside a drawer next to an expired passport and a pressed magnolia. When I got home, I dialed the number Rachel had once left on a hospital donation envelope back when she was listed as a close family friend. The line clicked 3 times. Her voice was quiet, young, slightly winded. "Oh, Mrs. Whitaker, I didn't expect... Is everything okay?" I didn't speak right away. I just came from the lawyer. A pause. Not confusion, recognition. "I didn't know he'd listed that address," she whispered. "He always said it was just his office. Or his quiet space. I'm so sorry." Her voice shifted like she was covering the receiver. "He told me you were strong, that you'd understand." I placed the phone down on the side table, still connected. Her voice kept moving in and out of the air like steam through a crack. Tom used to say I overwatered the plants, that they didn't need that much attention, that some things just survived better on neglect. That night, the porch light blinked once before staying dark. I didn't replace the bulb. A soft knock came just after 9. I opened the door to see a small figure beyond the hedge, clutching something gray and matted. "I couldn't find Mom," she said. "She had curls. Not like in the photo at Nadine's, but real ones, tighter, unbrushed. She held a stuffed rabbit by one ear, its eye dangling from a thread. I'm Lily. Are you the real wife of Mr. Tom?" She stared past me at the living room lamp, the old recliner, the carpet I'd cleaned every month for decades. "Why did he have two houses?" she asked. The porch air felt heavy. I wondered how much of the truth fit into a child's vocabulary. How many betrayals could sound like bedtime? I crouched, slightly adjusting my coat sleeve. "I don't know," I said. She looked disappointed, not surprised. Her bunny's foot dragged against the concrete as she turned. I wanted to offer her a coat, or cocoa, or something smaller than either. But I didn't move. The wind caught the corner of a flyer pinned to the mailbox, an advertisement for gutter cleaning. Tom had once insisted on doing it himself up on the ladder in his worn sneakers. I used to stand below with a towel just in case. There was no towel now. I watched Lily walk back toward the sidewalk one step slower than the last. No adult waited for her. No car idled nearby. I knew that walk. I had done it in my own way for years, leaving quietly, not knowing if someone would look back. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table. The paper from Ray Delaney was still in my coat pocket. I didn't take it out. Tom had built this house with insulation thicker than the code required. Said it kept everything quiet. Maybe that's what he wanted in the end. Rooms that didn't echo. He used to hum while sorting bills, a sound I once thought was contentment. Now I couldn't remember the melody. Rachel said he believed I'd understand, as if betrayal, when spoken gently, turned to kindness. I suppose that's what he always counted on, my silence. And I suppose for the first time it was something he got wrong. I used to think staying meant something. The night before I left, I folded each shirt without sound. The bedroom felt smaller, with every drawer emptied. The ring I wore for 37 years was already in the drawer beside the stove next to the checkbook I no longer opened. I didn't bring it. I didn't bring anything with initials engraved. There was no note. Just the house key turned sideways on the kitchen table, the way Tom used to leave it when he forgot his lunch. I set it there out of habit. No one called that morning. The silence made it easier to take 2 trips to the car without rushing. I left the good coat, the one I wore to funerals and to his mother's anniversary dinner. Someone else could use it, I figured. The drive out of Westbrook felt like going through a tunnel you didn't realize you were already in. Nothing looked different, but things stopped looking familiar. Irene Briggs opened the door before I knocked. She had thinning curls pinned with a yellow clip and wore slippers with embroidery worn off. "You from the other side of the bypass?" she asked. I nodded. She looked at me head to toe like she was measuring more than my height. "You're not one of those that asks a lot of questions, are you?" I shook my head. "Good. I don't need proof of income. I can tell you're not the type to skip rent." She didn't smile, just handed me the key and a sheet of rules that ended with, "Don't slam the screen door." The unit was ground floor, corner-thin, carpet-chipped tile, a window that didn't quite shut, and a heater that ticked. But there was quiet, the kind without obligation. I placed 2 canvas bags by the foot of the bed. One held clothes and a toothbrush. The other a teapot I bought that afternoon secondhand, but solid. White enamel with a faint crack under the handle. I found 2 matching cups and a pack of English breakfast tea with a faded expiration date. I set them on the counter like a ceremony. Later, I bought a bunch of artificial daisies for the plastic vase on the windowsill. Real flowers die quickly in places where no one visits. No one from Tom's side contacted me. Not Nadine, not the boys who used to call me Aunt Donna. At the funeral, they each hugged me loosely, like I was something they had to walk past. No one asked if I had stayed at the house. No one asked where I was now. I hadn't realized how easy it was to disappear. Not because you're hiding, but because no one's looking. At the supermarket near the new place, I ran into Clara from the auxiliary board. She glanced down at my basket instant oatmeal vinegar sponge and gave me a tight-lipped grin. "I heard about the will," she murmured, barely meeting my eyes. "Things like that, they sort themselves out eventually." She reached for a bag of oranges and didn't wait for a reply. When I got home, I placed the sponge beneath the sink and set the vinegar by the stove. It didn't feel like starting over. It felt like putting things where they belonged. A few days later, a card arrived from one of Tom's cousins in Ohio. No return address. The handwriting was careful looped. Inside it read, "Thank you for being a gracious presence. We know this must be difficult. Rachel is doing her best. Please understand the children need stability." There was no signature. I placed it in the drawer under the tea bags, not out of sentiment, but because the trash bin was full. I saw Lily again once from across the bus stop. She was with a younger boy, maybe her brother. She wore a coat 2 sizes too big and traced her finger along the fogged glass. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to wave. Tom used to say I was good at remembering birthdays. Every year, I sent out hand-addressed envelopes with cards and coupons and notes about new recipes. No one ever asked how I kept track of so many names. Now I realize it wasn't about remembering. It was about not being forgotten. There was a Christmas when Tom's family did a secret Santa gift exchange. I baked gingerbread with everyone's initials in icing. Tom brought a bottle of whiskey with the tag, "For anyone but Donna." They laughed. I did too. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I remember that moment now, the way some people remember smells or songs. Not because of what it meant then, but what it failed to mean. I didn't cry the day I left. Not when I turned in the keys. Not when I passed the shoe rack we built together. Not when I saw Rachel's name on the mailbox the next week. I just packed 2 bags, 1 coat, a teapot. That was all I took from 37 years. And all I needed. I used to think staying meant something. Now I know it only meant I hadn't chosen to leave. Not yet. I used to flinch at silence as if it meant I'd been forgotten. Now I find myself listening for it. The window in this room doesn't shut properly, so the wind gets in. It presses against the thin curtain like a child testing a locked door. I leave it be. There's no one here to complain about the draft. No one to move the curtain rod because it looks crooked from the hall. I unpacked slowly. 1 dish towel, a chipped plate with blue cornflowers around the rim. My father gave it to me when I moved in with Tom. I'd meant to throw it away so many times, but somehow it survived. I placed it on the shelf just high enough to reach without straining. Not where he would have put it above the stove for convenience. Here it's mine to use or not use at all. No one's mentioned me since the funeral, not the cousins. Not the neighbors who used to bring over pie. Maybe they think I'm still in the house somewhere between the front porch and Rachel's name on the deed. Irene offered me tea that first evening. Her kitchen smelled like lemon floor polish and old sugar. She looked me over, not judging, just calculating whether I'd be the sort to leave dishes in the sink. "You keep to yourself, I do." "Good. Quiet people don't wreck things." I bought a small electric kettle and 2 green mugs. The store had a deal on synthetic peonies, $3 for a bunch that would never wilt. I stuck them in an old pickle jar and placed them beside the window. The petals catch the afternoon light just enough to look alive. No one calls. No one knocks. I started setting my alarm just to have a reason to get up. The first meal I cooked here was a thin soup with rice and peas. I didn't add salt until I tasted it, something I never used to do. The pot didn't scorch. No one picked up their spoon, frowned, and said, "Linda puts cumin in hers, makes all the difference." I used a fork from a mismatched drawer set. It had a bent tine. I bent it back and used it anyway. I found a photograph wedged in a folder I hadn't opened in years, me in a corduroy jacket, leaning against a maple tree just beginning to change. My hair looked windblown, but I remembered that day. There'd been no wind. I was laughing at something my friend Valerie shouted from behind the camera. The laugh froze in the image almost like a dare. I tacked the photo to the wall using a sewing pin. It held just fine. A week passed before I heard from anyone again. "I wasn't supposed to come," Lily said. She stood at the edge of the walkway, holding a plastic bag with something lumpy inside. "Mom said it's complicated." But I had questions. She sat down cross-legged on the step. Her jeans were soaked at the knees. "He used to read stories, different ones for each of us. Mine had rabbits and a lighthouse." I didn't move. I didn't say her name. I thought maybe he read to you too. "He didn't," I said. "But I believe he meant to. He meant a lot of things." She unzipped the bag and pulled out a notebook, the kind with a soft leather cover and ragged edges from where someone had torn out pages. "He wrote this," she said. "In the back it says your name." I didn't read it. I took it. The cover was creased and warm from her hand. I flipped through the pages slowly past half-finished sketches, grocery lists, a few lines that looked like poetry, and then changed their mind. Near the end, in Tom's handwriting, unmistakable for its odd slant, "If anything ever happens, call Donna. She won't forget who people are even if she can't forgive them. She's the only one who stays when others leave." I closed the book. Lily stood brushing gravel from her palms. "Did he have 2 homes?" "I think he had 1 home," I said, "and many places he visited." She nodded as if that made sense. Maybe at her age it still could. "Mom's not mad at you," she said. "She's just scared of things that don't belong in her version of the story." "I don't belong in anyone's story now, but you're still here." I didn't answer. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a fabric rabbit, one ear sewn back with pink thread. "He gave me this and said it was from you." "Was it?" I shook my head. "Oh." She looked down at the toy. "That makes more sense." She left the rabbit on the steps when she walked away. I picked it up after she'd gone, pressed the tip of one ear between my fingers. It didn't smell like their house. It didn't smell like mine either. Later, I made tea and drank it slowly, the cup warm enough to keep both hands busy. Outside, the rain had started again, soft at first, then steadier. I didn't rush to close the window. There were no footsteps in the hall. No distant voice calling my name. No phone blinking with unread messages. Just the chair beneath me, the old photograph on the wall, and the soft hush of water finding its way through the screen. It took all these years to realize that silence was never the enemy. It just had to stop sounding like someone else's choice. I never changed the lock. Not because I was waiting for someone, but because no one ever knocked. The envelope was cream-colored, thicker than usual, with no stamp, no name, no return address, just tucked under the second-floor stair rail, folded once. Inside, a black and white copy of a property transfer, my old address in bold, and a scan of a passport. Rachel Mays. The same woman whose children still called my husband Daddy Tom without hesitation. There was also a note written in blue pen, slanted like someone was in a rush, but trying to seem calm. If she leaves the country for treatment, and the house is hers, then who does it fall to? I placed the paper beneath a chipped saucer I hadn't used since moving in. It didn't feel like news, just a reminder. The next morning, my phone vibrated twice in a row. Nadine. I hadn't heard her voice in 3 years. Last I saw her, she wore a lavender scarf and refused to look at me during the funeral. Her voice came through as if it were reading from a paper someone else had written. They say the girl's leaving the country. Terminal, maybe. Nobody's saying the word, but you can tell. Donna, we can't let the house go to the state, can we? I didn't answer. She filled the silence like she always did with just enough sugar to mask the edge. You're the only one who ever lived there full time. It makes sense. The kids already know you. I mean better you than some stranger. I reached for the tea kettle with my left hand. It was still warm from earlier. I let the water run a little longer than needed. She added, almost like it didn't matter, I heard they're preparing to move the children into group housing. Social services will get involved, especially with the youngest, still under 7. I waited for her to say something kind. She didn't. Instead, it's not about you. It's about what's best. You always said that. Then I asked a question that had been sitting untouched in the back of my mind for weeks. Why wasn't I invited to the memorial last Sunday? She hesitated. Oh, that wasn't anything formal. Just us cousins. More like a dinner. Didn't seem worth troubling you. You had your own way of saying goodbye, I imagine. I didn't respond. She let the silence end the call for both of us. Later that afternoon, the school janitor knocked softly on the break room door, holding a folded slip of paper like it was fragile. I unfolded it. Narrow-ruled, torn from a middle school assignment book. The handwriting slanted hard to the right. Mom left last night. Jude cries every hour. They say we'll be moved. Will you come? No signature, but the rabbit sticker on the bottom corner gave her away. Lily always chose the rabbits. I sat down without putting the paper away. A faint ring of tea from someone else's mug had dried onto the plastic table. It looked like a half-finished answer. They didn't come back because they missed me. They came back because something had fallen apart. At the grocery store later, I overheard a woman behind me say, "You give people what they need long enough and they forget you're a person." She wasn't talking to me, but the sentence stuck. At home, I opened the drawer under the sink where I kept spare cloth napkins. I hadn't used them once in this place. On top, I found the notepad I brought from the old house. Just a few pages left. One had a phone number written in Tom's handwriting. Below it, in smaller print, "Donna knows what to do." I stared at that line for a long time. He hadn't asked me. He'd assigned me. That night, I cooked rice and eggs with scallions. A simple meal, the kind no one ever asked for. I ate half of it and left the rest to cool on the counter. My phone buzzed again. This time, Mark, Tom's nephew. "Hi, Aunt Donna. Heard there's talk of court stuff with the house. Uncle Tom always said you'd handle things. Hope you're okay. Let us know what's next." Not one mention of the children. Not one mention of Rachel. Only the house. I looked over at the envelope from that morning, still pressed beneath the saucer. I didn't move it. I let it sit there, like proof that I had a choice. The following day, Mrs. Briggs asked if I needed anything from the market. I told her no, even though I was out of onions and toothpaste. She patted my hand gently and said, "You don't owe them a thing." I didn't tell her who them was. She seemed to understand anyway. That afternoon, I sat beside the window. A breeze moved the curtain just slightly. The memento box I kept nearby was cracked open. Inside a wooden thimble from my mother, a bus pass from the day I first met Tom, and a folded picture Lily had once drawn of a house with 3 doors. One red, one blue, one black. No windows. I didn't know which door I belonged behind. No one knocked that day, but someone had already opened the back gate. I heard it creak, then close again soft, like a sigh. I didn't get up to check. Sometimes presence makes more noise than absence, and sometimes the quiet is the loudest form of clarity. I never liked the sound of my own name until I heard it left out of things. They called me into the office after lunch. No warning, just a folded paper slipped under the staff lounge door with my initials in red ink. The kind of red that doesn't mean urgent, just seen. The woman sitting behind the desk wore a pin shaped like a pear. Not the fruit, just the shape. She pushed a stack of forms toward me, face down. "You don't have to sign," she said without looking up. "But once this is processed, the children are wards of the county." I didn't speak. I unfolded my own envelope, 3 notarized pages. Not fresh, not rushed. The stamp had already faded around the edges. Temporary guardianship. Residency certification. A printed letter from Dr. Monroe capable of providing stable, non-institutional care. Cognitive capacity intact. The woman tapped her pen on the top form. "After what he did, I just wonder why you're stepping into this." I didn't flinch. Because I was the last person he trusted. And I think for once he was right. She stopped tapping. That night I placed 3 mismatched bowls on the shelf above the sink. Not to serve anyone, just to know they were there. I folded the bedsheet into thirds, then tucked it under once more until it fit the narrow cot against the wall. Not a bed, just something that held. The kettle hissed before the click. I held the handle longer than needed. Later, Nadine showed up uninvited. She stood in the doorway with her keys still in hand, jangling them like the sound would distract from the purpose. Ray said there's an account she began under the girl's name. 75,000. No one's accessed it. I already knew. Ray had sent the note through an old email address, the one I used when I didn't want to be found. There were 2 lines, account set up 2 years ago. Access requires spousal signature. Nadine shifted her weight. "You're the only one who can unlock it." I let the silence do its own work. "We're not asking for anything. Just unlock it. Then you can go back to whatever this is." Her eyes skimmed the kettle, the curtain, the chipped mug I hadn't moved since morning. I touched the envelope on the table, already signed, already sealed. "I'll do it," I said. "But you'll leave my name out of every family call message, holiday list, and obituary. I want no mention, no photograph on the table, no seat saved at Christmas." Nadine stared. "You're being careful," I finished. She left the door open on her way out. The next morning, I handed Lily a folded note with the new address written in block letters. No street name, just a number and a landmark. She didn't ask why. At recess, she stood behind the hedge while Jude pulled petals from a daisy. "Will we have to call you Grandma?" she asked, not directly. I shook my head once. "You can call me what makes sense." She looked at Jude, then back at me. "Then I'll call you Safe." I didn't correct her. Later that week, Ray brought the documents in person. No appointment, just a knock and the weight of old leather shoes on the stairs. He held out the pen, still capped. "It's a clean transfer," he said. "You'll sign. The funds go into a joint trust for educational and housing purposes." He placed a copy of the marriage certificate beside the checkbook. "I didn't know he kept this," I murmured. "He didn't." I did. I signed without a second read. Ray lingered. "You were always the one who stayed quiet the longest in meetings. That's why he trusted you." I didn't answer. I refolded the document, placed it in the file cabinet labeled Other. That evening I steamed rice and reheated vegetables. Jude drew a picture of a fish with human feet. Lily sat cross-legged, reading aloud without turning the pages. No one asked what we were. No one offered labels. No one needed to. After they slept, I sat beside the window and looked at the dark line of pavement that divided the streetlight from the shadow. My slippers had gone soft at the heel. I didn't replace them. There was a message from Nadine on the machine when I woke up short-clipped, meant for a version of me that still made casseroles. "We'll note your terms. You won't be on the registry, but the house Rachel's will need upkeep. It won't manage itself." I deleted it without playing it twice. That afternoon, I opened the top drawer and found the envelope with Tom's handwriting again, the one that had held the emergency trust password. The loop in the D was smaller than I remembered. Beneath it was a single sentence in print. If she's reading this, it means I never got brave enough. I folded it once slowly and placed it behind the photograph of the tree from my first autumn alone. There are rooms where your name is only spoken to shift blame. I had lived in many of them, but now when Lily called for help from the back room, or when Jude cried and reached for the second button on my cardigan, I didn't need to explain who I was. I didn't need a title. I'd already chosen not to answer to anything else. Some things lose their weight the moment you set them down. I laid out the wedding photo first. His tie was crooked that day, but no one had dared fix it. I remembered the way the corners of my mouth ached from holding a smile that didn't belong to me. I slid the frame from the glass, folded the image in half, and placed it between the property deed and the manila envelope holding the marriage license. The ring went in last. The engraving had faded not from time, but from being turned inward too many times. I mailed it to Ray with one sentence on the card. Put it in the safe. I don't need proof I existed. The second envelope was thinner. A formal refusal of claim typed in 12-point Times New Roman, notarized at the post office without eye contact. It waived any rights to residual estate retirement funds or trust balances related to Thomas Whitaker or his surviving dependents. I signed at the bottom twice. One line for me, one line to say I wouldn't return. I checked the mailbox 3 times before the final paper arrived. The name on the envelope was still the old one, Donna Whitaker. A name that once stood for dishes done by hand, guest rooms cleaned for ungrateful visitors, and nods of approval not always earned. The application to change my last name was simple. 1 form, 1 check, 1 quiet decision. The clerk at the county office skimmed the document. You sure you want to use your mother's maiden name? Some people feel weird about that. I looked at the coffee stain on her sleeve and said, that's the only name that never got crossed out on an envelope meant for me. The drive to the cemetery took longer than I remembered. My mother's headstone leaned slightly as if still listening. I placed nothing on the grave. No flowers. No offering. Just a folded copy of the name change request. It took me 37 years to walk back to the only person who never erased me from anything. No one heard it. Not even the stone. Back at the room, I pinned a small paper sign above the mirror. Whitaker crossed out with a red line. Green written beneath in green marker. No ceremony, no announcement. Just ink. 3 days passed. Rain fell but didn't stay. Then a knock. I opened the door to find Lily, Owen, and Levi. No backpacks. No stuffed animals. No shoes caked in playground mud. Just a single book in Lily's hands. Charlotte's Web, worn and taped. The back cover hung by one corner. Lily held it like it was breakable. Mom said if you were still around, it meant the ending hadn't been written yet. I moved aside. Not an invitation, just absence of resistance. Levi glanced at the chipped mug on the table. You don't use the cups from our house anymore. Owen pointed to the corner where the floorboards creaked. You sleep here? Lily looked up. Do we? None of it was a question. They sat without being told. I didn't rush to speak. Lily opened the book and turned to the last page. Torn, not missing, just unreadable. Uncle Jerry said this story doesn't need an ending, that some things are better left hanging. I took the book from her hands and ran my fingers over the frayed edge. The smell of dust and worn glue clung to it like something hidden in a drawer too long. I didn't answer. Instead, I traced the inside cover with my thumb. Tom's handwriting, faint but intact, read, To Lily, Owen, and Levi, finish this however you want. I placed the book on the table and looked at the children. No one asked why I left. No one asked what I had done with the name I no longer wore. Lily smoothed her dress with both palms. Mom's gone. They said she might not come back. Aunt Nadine cried, but only when people were looking. Levi fiddled with a loose thread on his sleeve. We're not supposed to talk about you. They said you chose strangers over family. Owen looked out the window. Are we strangers? I poured tea into 4 cups. Mismatched. None from the old kitchen. No one touched theirs. I don't owe anyone forgiveness, I said. But if someone needs another ending, we don't need permission to write it. The rain began again. No thunder. Just a steady sound like paper being folded again and again until it softens. I didn't tell them to stay. I didn't tell them to leave. The name on the door had changed, but I hadn't shut it. And that I thought might be enough.